God promised Abraham that he would have an innumerable amount of descendants, more than the stars in the sky. For exactly 430 years, Abraham's descendants, the Israelites, had been slaves in the land of Egypt. Pharaoh was the ruler of Egypt. God sent Moses to Pharaoh to tell him to let God's people go. Pharaoh refused to listen to God. God then visited Egypt with terrible plagues. God was demonstrating his incredible power. God had authority over all of the Egyptians' false gods. Repeatedly, God proved his power and might. Now remember, some of the Egyptians believed God. They were listening to him, but Pharaoh would not. The final plague that God sent was by far the worst. God sent the death angel to slay every family's firstborn child and every animal's firstborn. According to the Bible, there was a lot of crying in Egypt because there wasn't a single household that didn't have someone who died. Pharaoh summoned Moses during the night and told him to leave Egypt. This is exactly what God predicted would occur. Moses and the rest of the Israelites hurried away. Their bread did not even rise, which is why the Jews still celebrate the Feast of Unleavened Bread today. In the middle of the night, Moses led 600,000 people out of Egypt. God led his people with a cloud pillar during the day and a fire pillar at night. Following these incredible sights would serve as a reminder that God was always with them, guiding them every step of the way to the Promised Land. In Numbers 20, Moses and the congregation came to the wilderness of Zin. Numbers 20. And the people of Israel, the whole congregation, came into the wilderness of Zin in the first month, and the people stayed in Kadesh. And Miriam died there and was buried there. Now there was no water for the congregation, and they assembled themselves together against Moses and against Aaron. And the people quarreled with Moses and said, "Would that we had perished when our brothers perished before the Lord. Why have you brought the assembly of the Lord into this wilderness, that we should die here, both we and our cattle? And why have you made us come up out of Egypt to bring us to this evil place? It is no place for grain or figs or vines or pomegranates, and there is no water to drink." Then Moses and Aaron went from the presence of the assembly to the entrance of the tent of meeting and fell on their faces. And the glory of the Lord appeared to them, and the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Take the staff and assemble the congregation, you and Aaron your brother, and tell the rock before their eyes to yield its water. So you shall bring water out of the rock for them, and give drink to the congregation and their cattle." In frustration with the people of God, Moses chose to strike the rock instead of speaking to it. And Moses took the staff from before the Lord as he commanded him. Then Moses and Aaron gathered the assembly together before the rock, and he said to them, "Hear now, you rebels, shall we bring water for you out of this rock?" And Moses lifted up his hand and struck the rock with his staff twice, and water came out abundantly, and the congregation drank, and their livestock. And the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "Because you did not believe in me, to uphold me as holy in the eyes of the people of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land that I have given them." Earlier in Exodus, the Lord did instruct Moses to strike the rock to produce water. The whole Israelite community set out from the desert of Sin, traveling from place to place as the Lord commanded. They camped at Rephidim, but there was no water for the people to drink. So they quarreled with Moses and said, "Give us water to drink." Moses replied, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you put the Lord to the test?" But the people were thirsty for water there, and they grumbled against Moses. They said, "Why did you bring us up out of Egypt to make us and our children and livestock die of thirst?" Then Moses cried out to the Lord, "What am I to do with these people? They are almost ready to stone me." The Lord answered Moses, "Go out in front of the people. Take with you some of the elders of Israel, and take in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile, and go. I will stand there before you by the rock at Horeb. Strike the rock, and water will come out of it for the people to drink." So Moses did this in the sight of the elders of Israel, and he called the place Massah and Meribah, because the Israelites quarreled and because they tested the Lord, saying, "Is the Lord among us or not?" In Exodus 17, Moses obeyed God by striking the rock. However, in Numbers 20, Moses disobeyed God by striking the rock rather than speaking to it. The incident in Numbers 20 was the second time Moses struck the rock, the first time being in Exodus 17. Therefore, we teach that Moses was punished for striking the rock twice in the sense of striking it in Numbers 20 and in Exodus 17, not in the sense of striking it 2 times in Numbers 20. New Testament scripture in 1 Corinthians teaches that the rock in the desert was intended by God to be a picture of His Son, Jesus Christ. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 1 to 4. Moreover, brethren, I would not that ye should be ignorant, how that all our fathers were under the cloud, and all passed through the sea, and were all baptized unto Moses in the cloud and in the sea, and did all eat the same spiritual meat, and did all drink the same spiritual drink, for they drank of that spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Christ. When the Lord instructed Moses to strike the rock in Exodus 17, He intended to establish a picture of Christ as our Redeemer. In Psalms and Isaiah, it is stated repeatedly that Christ is our rock and cornerstone who has been struck, that is, killed, for our sake, and He will bring forth streams of living water. John chapter 4, verse 10. Jesus answered and said unto her, If thou knewest the gift of God, and who it is that saith to thee, Give me to drink, thou wouldest have asked of Him, and He would have given thee living water. Furthermore, the book of Hebrews states that Christ died once for all and that no further sacrifice for sins is required. So, the Lord intended Moses to strike the rock in the desert only once in the Exodus 17 scene, thus picturing Jesus sacrificed only once to bring us salvation. Later in Numbers 20, the Lord told Moses to only speak to the rock in order to preserve the image created in Exodus 17. When Moses chose to strike the rock a second time, he threw a wrench into the picture painted in Exodus 17. Had God not corrected Moses' error, he would have been perplexed by the distorted picture, concluding that Christ, by which we mean the rock, had to be sacrificed repeatedly for our salvation. As a result, God rebuked Moses to ensure that we understood the image of the rock, preventing him from entering the Promised Land correctly. During the process, the Lord created a new image to support a correct understanding of salvation. By excluding Moses from the Promised Land, the Lord demonstrated that we cannot enter salvation, i.e. the Promised Land, through the works of the law, i.e. Moses, but only through the works of Jesus. That means by Joshua, which is the name Yeshua or Jesus.
In closing, our question for the day: what's a worship song that has helped you feel closer to God?